Hey there, everyone. Hope you all are doing great. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all of us who all are joining us globally. I am Partharu, Events and Program Manager for Microsoft Reactor India. And yes, I do welcome you all to the episode of Build a Microsoft 365 Copilot extension to bring external data with Arjun Menon and Kamal Shree. Before we go to our today's session, let's go through our code of conduct. We are all here to learn together, participate together. So please be respectful of other people's views, understanding their differences, be kind and considerate in a way we all engage. Yes, we do encourage you all to participate. Please drop in all your questions in the chat section and we'll pick it up from there. Now, I'd like to bring in Kamal Shri, who is the host for our today's event and co-hosting along with Arjun Menon. Hi Kamal,
Hi,
hi Arjun.
hi Parth. How are you?
Hello.
I am all good.
Hey, Arjun. All good?
All good, Kamal. How are you doing? How are you doing today?
Absolutely fine. Good.
Hey, hello.
Yeah. So thanks, Parth. So we will kickstart with another season or episode of Copilot Chronicles. So just to refresh, Copilot Chronicles is all about it's an open source weekly tech series where we talk about M365 teams. It features insightful sessions on how Copilot can enhance the Microsoft 365 ecosystem. Now, it's just not about M365. We also touch base on the GitHub, Azure AI, Gen AI, Power AI to leverage our business or app ideas to a broader extent. So definitely, I believe the cities might interest you. So we have also seen last week a Shree who kind of spoke about how to transform the way you work with Microsoft 365 Copilot, and then followed by Bob, my colleague, who kind of spoke about how to extend Copilot for M365 for the line of business, apps, and data, who kind of went in depth about the Copilot. And today we have Arjun, one of our awesome MVP and a speaker, is a Microsoft 365 solution architect and in M365 development for almost 14 years of experience. His expertise lies in transforming digital workspace using M365 and focusing on Teams and SharePoint. So, without further ado, I'll just give you a little overview as to what he's doing because I don't want to be a spoiler because he's going to take over it. So, today he will walk you
Yep.
through how you can extend M365 Copilot by building the Microsoft Teams messaging extension. And in this session, also, he will connect with an existing application and will try to bring the data to the Copilot ecosystem where the user can leverage the power of Copilot, even from an external line of business system. So you might find the talk, Bob, that he gave last week and what Arjun is giving would be aligning with a lot of common factors, but definitely it would be a kind of a refreshing session for someone who's attending for the first time. And if you've already kind of followed the series, definitely it would be a learning session for you. So without further ado,
Wow.
Arjun, the stage is all yours. Go ahead.
All
Thank
yours.
you. Thank you.
Floor is yours. Yeah.
Uh, Thank you, Parth and Kamal. Just to check, is my screen visible to you guys?
Not yet. I think it's processing. Yes.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Thank you. Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are connecting to or viewing this session later on too. Uh, I am Arjun Menon. I am a Microsoft MVP. Just to give a bit of introduction about myself, I'm a Microsoft MVP in the Microsoft 365 development space. I'm also a co-maintainer for CLI for Microsoft 365. I'm a team member of Microsoft 365 and Power Platform Community, the PNP team, and I work for Solution Architect with TCS. Here are some of my social media handles, which you can connect with me if you've got any kind of doubts, and I'll be more than happy to help you guys on that front. So again, thanks again the entire Reactor series for giving me the opportunity to give the session what we're going to do that today. All right. So today, what I'm going to do is that I think the past couple of weeks we've been having sessions where we talked about the Microsoft 365 Copilot, how it is going to help your day-to-day activities, how you can use it effectively to make sure that your all your day-to-day activities become super super easy, right? So in today's session, what I'm going to do is to take one more level deeper into that. Uh, uh, and how you can bring the external data into the Microsoft 365 Copilot ecosystem. Now, what you see in this particular slide is what how the Copilot is going to help you in you making your day-to-day activities pretty easier. Uh, we all know that the whole Copilot is running, or rather using extensively, the Microsoft Graph, where whole of your enterprise's echo data is there. So combining with the power of LLMs along with this graph, this Copilot is going to make your life super super easier. Be it getting the information easier, do some kind of actions, drafting emails based on existing communications. I'm not going to the details on what are the advantages because it's already covered. So today, what I'm going to do is that how you can extend Copilot into the next level. Now, what you see here is a very very high level architecture of the Copilot. Again, I'm sure you would have all seen it, or if you have not seen it, now this is one of the architecture where the whole Copilot runs in. Now you can see the areas on the right is what the whole meat of the sandwich is going to be. You will have the Copilot which is going to be in the center, and it gets the data from the Microsoft Graph, and using the power of LLM, it processes and gives back the response to the user. Typically, that's what the user is going to use for. For the user, it doesn't really matter how it really works, but for us, or rather some of us who are into the development, we'll be curious on that. Now, in this particular session, what I would be typically focusing on is on this area called the plugins, where I'll show you how you can create a plugin to get the data into the Copilot, so that the combination of the graph data along with the extended data gets super powerful. All right. Next slide. Now you see, this is the extensibility path for the Copilot. Now all you see is that the Copilot lies in this particular area where you within running on top of the Microsoft Graph, where all your enterprise data is there. But we all know the enterprises, right? They would have their data scattered across the multiple line of business systems. They would have, let's say, something in on-premise, something in cloud. It is a mix and match of everything. How about if you are able to bring those data into the Copilot, so that the user who is using the Copilot, they will even get the data outside the whole M365 ecosystem. Now, enterprises will really love it, and I'm sure that is the area which they are going to do that. Now, if you see here on the in the right hand side, there is something called Graph Connectors. So Graph Connector, I'm not going to the deep into the Graph Connector. So what Graph Connectors does is that it will get the data from the external systems. It will index into the Microsoft 365 ecosystem using the semantic in-text, and so that the Copilot, when you search something, it'll be able to surface the data over there. That is one way to extend the data. Another way to extend the Copilot is using the plugins. Now, plugins are a component. It is like a pluggable applications where what you can do is that you can write the code so that within the code, it will get the data from your line of business systems, be it from the ServiceNow, or be it from, let's say, Jira, or be it from any of your homegrown applications as well. So you will have a lot of homegrown applications, and you'll even get the data from there. Push using the messaging extensions, you'll be able to surface the data into this one. Now you see, we saw two different things, right? Plugins and the Graph Connector. Now there is also one more connector which is available called Power Platform Connector. Now what you can see in the bottom line is that the three ways in which you can extend the Copilot so that you can get the data into the whole ecosystem. Now, if your organization is someone who has invested extensively in the Power Platform, definitely Power Platform Connector is something which you can get the data from. You'll be using the connectors which is already available in the Power Platform, push the data into the Copilot, so that when you create a plugin, the plugins would be available in the M365 chat interface. I'll show you in my demo session how it really shows, but just to keep you informed, this is how it works. Now we talked about Graph Connector. Now what Graph Connector do is that it will get the data. It will, it is like the typical ETL, extract, transform, load approach. What happens is that using Graph Connectors, you'll be able to query the source systems or subset of this source system, push the data as a connector into the M365 ecosystem. Now, the advantage is that the moment your data is the part of the graph, the Copilot will be able to access it. And with that, you can even bring any of your external data, be it some kind of external website or be it some from say documents which is not part of the M365 ecosystem. Anything could be brought into the graph connector. And this comes the third part, which we will be delving into the details in the upcoming 40 minutes. So the messaging extension is something which I'm sure if some of you would have already used messaging extensions or have built a messaging extension. If not, what messaging extension is that? Let's say within the Teams itself, you'll be able to have one kind of applications where you'll be able to do some kind of search or do some kind of actions. Now, this has have been there from the beginning itself, from the Teams itself. Now, what the Copilot, what we are doing is that Copilot, this messaging extensions could be plugged into the Copilot so that when you do some kind of actions in the Copilot, it can even use the messaging extension which is already available, leverage the code structure which is already available, use the same business process, business logic which you have already built in the messaging extension so that Copilot will be able to use it. So that's an area which we will be focusing on. Now, in this slide, if you're not sure which approach you want to use it for building the plugin or an extension, this would be one easy guide to use that. Again, this is not set in stone. It could be very well varied according to based on what you are looking for as well. All right. Now we saw about the difference between the plugins and the connector. Now what it does is that the graph connector get the data. You can see this directions in which it is going, right? You will read the data from the external systems. You will push the data into the graph, and so that it will be accessible for the semantic index of the Copilot. That's how the graph connector extension works. Now, if it comes to the plugin is more or less like a real-time data. The reason why I say it is a real-time data is because when you do any kind of search in the Copilot, what happens is under the plugin, it calls an API, a real-time API, so that it will get the data from the real-time API and you'll be able to process the data and get back to the Copilot. Say, for example, take a simple example of, let's say, if you want to do a kind of a comparison between the stocks between, let's say, company A and company B. Okay, what you do is that you create a plugin so that the plugin will get the data, get the stock information using the power of LLM. What you can do is that you can do the prompt accordingly so that you'll do all kind of manipulations or kind of the data structuring based on that. So that kind of options is really possible. So in a nutshell, if you want to have some kind of a Copilot power, using the power of Copilot in a real-time data, using the plugin would be the ideal scenario for you. All right. Now we talked about how the whole plugin works, right? I mean, how it typically works. Now, if you see in this particular one, a plugin which we are going to build is going to be a Teams messaging extension. Now, we all know Teams messaging extension is an app, a Teams app, which is residing on your Microsoft 365 ecosystem. Now, within this one, it has got three main components. You've got an app backend. Now, your app backend is your area where you would define your code. Let's say the code where you will get the data from the API, do all kind of authentications, any kind of business process which you want to do that. So basically, you would have a layer called API layer or some kind of app service layer which is lying in Azure or any kind of SaaS services. That's what the messaging extension you'll use. Then you will have something called a manifest. Manifest is like a framework. It is like a skeleton of your Teams messaging extension. It is where you define what is the title of that, what is the description, and what are the parameters which you're using for the messaging extension. Say, for example, let's take an example of the stock again. So when you want to query the information about the stock, the most important parameter which you got to get is the name of the stock, right? So what you define is that in the manifest you define all the parameters over here so that when the user searches, the manifest will be able to process it, push it across to their backend, and will be able to get the data. That's what it does. Now, once the processing is done, you have to show these details to the end users, right? For that, we use adaptive card. Now, we all know the power of adaptive card. You can have an actionable adaptive card. You can have a rich user interface in the Teams, in the Outlook, or any kind of clients which you use it, which is supported by the adaptive card. Now, the advantage of the adaptive card is that it is even actually updated on a live basis. So if some kind of modifications is done on the adaptive card, it is real time. So that is the power which it brings into the table. All right. Now, to the session which we're going to do here, what we're going to do is that we're going to create a Teams a messaging extension from the scratch and do that. Now, for doing that, what are the prerequisite which you need is that so we would be using Visual Studio Code for our development. That is the core prerequisite. I'm sure all of us developers are pretty much comfortable with VS Code, and this way of development is also not different from what we do there. So all you need is a VS Code environment structure. Then all you need is a Node.js setup. You need a Node.js 18.18 for your development to work on. And needless to say, you need to have a Microsoft 365 license with Copilot so that you'll be able to see the messaging extensions in combination with uh, the Copilot. Then, of course, you need to have the side loading enabled. What is side loading means? You'll be able to upload the Teams app which you have built to the organization's Teams app catalog so that you'll be able to see that in your Teams interface. All right. So that those are the prerequisites which you will have it. Now, what I do is so in today's demo, what we're going to do is that we'll be going to create a plugin from the scratch, like I mentioned already, a simple Hello World plugin. So it'll hardly take say 5 to 10 minutes of time for you to create a plugin. It is that easy to create an M365 Copilot extension from the scratch using the Visual Studio code. And once we have that up and running, I'll also show you one of the applications which has been built using the famous Northwind database application, where you will be able to do all kind of complicated queries, gather informations about their existing line of business systems as well. Again, what I will do is that this is already available in the open source built by the developer advocates of Microsoft. It's already open source. You can go to that. I'll share the link once after the session is over so that you'll be able to try out yourself. All right. Now let's jump into the funny part, the demo, right? So, like as I said, the first thing which I would do is that I'll be creating an application from the scratch and will show you how it really works. All right. Just to do a check, is my screen visible? Because I switched the window, just want to make sure it works. If Kamal or Parth can confirm it, please.
Yes, Arjun, it works.
Thank you. Thanks a lot. All righty. Now, so what you can see is that this is my Visual Studio. So before I do that, let me quickly change the color theme so that it will be easy for the demonstration. Oh, sorry. All right. So what you can see is that I have my Visual Studio code open, and what you can see is that there is something called a Teams toolkit. Now, Teams toolkit is an extensions which you can install from the extensions library. Oh, sorry. All right. So this is the Teams toolkit which I was referring to. You can have a Visual Studio, and this is a super easy way where you can create a Teams app, be it a bot, be it a tab, or be it a messaging extension with a couple of clicks, so that it will even have a ready-made scaffolded boilerplate code for you, so that all you need to do is that press F5 and it starts working. So if you guys have not tried it out, this is a go-to tool for that. Now here in this demo, what I'm going to do is that I'm going to use the same thing, and couple of things which I want you to keep aware is that there are a couple of settings which is already available. And you see this one. Sorry. Now you can see you can connect your M365 account into the Teams toolkit so that when you deploy the application, your Teams app gets automatically installed. You don't need to do the build date, you don't need to do the manual update. All it does is that a press of F5 will automatically do that. So you can connect with your accounts over here so that it will the Teams toolkit will be automatically be able to do that. That is one thing. Along with that, another thing which you can also do that you can even connect your Azure portal so that when you do the deployment, it automatically provisions in your Azure portal. So these are the couple of features. There are many more features available here. You can try it out if you have not used it. So here, what I'm going to do is that I'm going to create a new app. So we all know that I'm going to create a messaging extensions here. I'm going to custom search result, and I'm going to start with the bot. works. Again, you don't need to worry about that. These steps are already explained in the learn documentations step by step without any issue. So even if you're not following what I do, you can always go back to that later as well. All right. TypeScript is my language, and I'm going to do a browse as code, and here's what I'm going to do. It. Let's say I'm going to give a very complicated name for a application. Hello world. Yeah, super complicated name. All right, let's do that. Bye. Super. So what happened is that it has scaffolded the files for you. It automatically opened that in the Visual Studio Code. So the advantage is that you'll be able to see all these files over here. I'm not going to go into the details on what are these folder structures because it is already documented. What I'm going to do is that I'll just go into some of these areas which is very, very relevant for us. First thing is that I'll go to the manifest file. Okay, so manifest, if you have worked in the teams application, I'm sure you are already familiar with this one. If not, I'll just give into the core areas which is really, really important to us. Now, if you see here, this is the area what it really matters for the Teams messaging extensions. So what it does is that, let's assume that you have an API or you are going to get that informations from your external with multiple parameters. Say for example, let's say you have got an inventory database. You want to do a query on, let's say, the product name or the stock count or the list of countries where we are supplying it. If you have that kind of combinations, you can have all those parameters added over here, so that one, messaging extensions will be able to parse the data. Two, the Copilot will be able to parse the informations to give back the result. That is where you the whole idea lies in. All right. Sorry. All right. So another important thing which you have to make sure is that this particular area. So we all developers have a tendency to have the descriptions pretty basic, right? When you're building when you are building a messaging extension for the Copilot, you have to ensure that you give a proper detailed description. The reason is because we all know that the M365 Copilot chat is a common interface where you can have any number of extensions or any kind of plugins added. So if the Copilot wants to identify what you're going to search and route it to the right plugin, you have to ensure that you give the details in proper. All right. Say for example, what I have to do is, see, this is the descriptions which you have to give so that you explain in detail what this particular plugin is going to happen. Because if you're trying with a hello world, even if you don't give a description, it works. But in your enterprise systems, if you're going to have multiple plugins, you need to ensure that you're giving proper details so that the Copilot will be able to understand it. All right. So here, what I'm going to do is, say, for example, this is a sorry plugin plugin for searching. Sorry, I've got a note packages from npm library. Okay. Again, this scaffolded tool which is given by the Teams toolkit. This is the operations which it does. So what it does is that it will go to the npm library, use the API of the npm library, and gets back the details. So that is what it is doing it. All right. Again, I'm not going to do anything else. Again, this is not the right way. In your real-time scenario, you have to be more descriptive. But for now, I'll just live with that because it works otherwise also. All right. I'm not going to do any kind other modifications here. All I'll do is let me make a quick run here. So again, what I'll do is start the. You see, it runs. You see, it has it all the things has been working on. It will even explain the details. What are the steps which is being happening under the covers? So what happens under the covers is that it uses something called Teams FX CLI so to do these actions. So under the covers, it uses a YAML file, and in the YAML file, all the commands are already defined. Say what it does is that it will create a Teams app, it will create a bot in the bot framework, and also it will also create an Azure AD app, because we all know that a messaging extension is a bot under the covers. Sorry, it's other way. uh, Messaging extensions runs on top of bot. So when you send a message to a messaging extension, it will under the covers is calling a bot API. So it uses the bot framework and gets back the results. That's how it works. So you need to, for that you need to have an Azure AD app for authenticating with your M365 tenant. So that's why an Azure AD app would be created under the covers. All right. Again, it takes this much time for the very first time because you have to install the node packages for the first time. Otherwise, it will not take this much time. So you don't need to worry about the time which it is taking right now. All right. Let's see that what is happening here. All right. While it loads, what I can do is I can show you an interface of the M365, the Copilot in the chat interface. Just a second. It's taking unusually more time than expected. But if not, don't worry, I've got a backup plan as well. So while it loads, so what you see here is the a tenant where I have the M365 Copilot active. So what is going to happen is that when you go to the Copilot, you see this is the default Copilot which it will work, where you can have all the default the Copilot actions. You will be able to get the summarize the emails, get the details about the documents and everything. I'm not going to go to the details of that because I'm sure you would have already seen it. If not, there are a lot of videos which is already available showing the out of the box capabilities of the Copilot. But here, what it really matters is that if you see the Copilot here, you'll be able to see something called an application icon over here. So what happens is that when you click on the action, it will show all the plugins which are already available over here. Now, if you see here, this is one of the custom plugin which I've created. This is another one, and this is another one which I've created. All right. So these are so in your scenarios there will be a lot of plugins which is going to come up here, and it will work. I think it has got work. Let's see what is the issue. Bot name is already registered. All right. Things are easier because I think we should have proper name. All right, I'm not going to do it again because if you give a proper name, because what the tenant which I'm going to use is a common sandbox tenant, so that I'm sure there is going to be a conflict. So I'm not going to create it from the scratch. What I'll do is that I have a code which I've created just before this demo, so that I'll be able to show you how it works without any modifications. Let me quickly open that from my end. All right. Again, what the code which you're going to see is there. Let me just quickly show you the code again. So what it does is that, like as I mentioned, it will get the data from an open API. Again, this is an open API which you're going to consume. In your real-time scenarios, it could be any APIs which is already available. So you get the data, process the data, and give back the response to the user. That's what we are doing it. So what I'll do is that, let me quickly stop the other instance, running instance. Stop it. I think it is stopped. So we should be good. If I've got this tunnel stopped, let me just close this. Now let me just quickly run this. Now, like I mentioned, this is already another app which I've already created. What I'm going to do is that I'm going to run this one. Hopefully this works. That's okay. You don't need to worry about this. Okay, so the actions are being taken up. Okay, so we've got it running. Awesome. Beautiful. So what happens is that since we have already given the login details over here, it automatically tries to log in with that account in your browser. So what I'll do is, let me give my password here. And I'm going to approve it. All right, I'll switch it. Again, if you're using a new Teams client, this prompt will not happen because I've made the configurations in my tenant as the new Teams. In your scenarios, you can ignore that particular message which you show. It automatically opens in the Teams as well. Right? Well, we are setting things up for you, which is weird. I've already set things. Another minute. In the meanwhile, if you guys have got any questions, I'll be more than happy to answer it. All right, we've got the things here. So when I go to the Copilot, what I see is that I'll just close this. So you can see there's something called npm finder local. So there is a toggle button which is available. So if you want to enable all these extensions, you can switch it on. But in my scenarios, I'm going to run it locally in this particular one, and this is what I'm going to do there. So like I mentioned, what this particular uh, plugin does is that it will search the npm API, get back the package which I'm going to search, and give the details about this one. All right. So what I'm going to do is I'll ask the Copilot, give me details about CLI for Microsoft 365 package using npm finder. Now you can notice the details which I've given. I have mentioned that the Copilot has to use a plugin called npm finder, and it has to give the details about npm CLI for Microsoft 365 package. So this is how you have to define the prompt, because it all depends on how you are going to create the prompt for the Copilot, so that Copilot will be able to understand it, process it, get back the result accordingly. So let's try it out. So what is happening under the covers is that it is invoking an API which is already defined in the messaging extensions, and it will consume the npm API and will try to get back the result. All right. Well, so you see this one. Even though this information is not part of your M365 ecosystem, it is able to get the details from the details from the npm registry. So this is how you can bring any kind of external data into the system. Now I'm sure you all would be wondering, this is pretty straightforward, right? I mean, we're getting the data from an external API, get this one. But this wouldn't be the case in your real-time scenarios. In your real-time scenarios, you would have your homegrown applications which would either be in your, let's say, in your VPN, in your firewall, what kind of configurations and authentication mechanisms, and get back the data. And you want the Copilot to be able to use that data, show it to the end users. So for that, I'm not going to create it from the scratch. There is, like I mentioned already, there is already an open source application which has been created by the dev advocates team of Microsoft, which is already available. Probably I'll share the links probably after the meeting, where you can go through that. What I'll do is that I'll just try to run that, and will try to give various prompt, and will show you how it really works. All right. Now we got the details here. Now just to make it crazy, we'll ask something which is not coming under the scope of this one. Let's say, give me the details of all beverages using npm finder. Ideally, I should not get the details because I've given the scope that, okay, it has to get the data from the npm finder. But if there is a node package called beverages, I'm sure we will get the result, but I hardly doubt so it is available. Huh, well, interesting. That's what it works, right? I mean, there are packages called, these are the beverages which is already, well, probably I should have given us something weird, a weird a question, something like which is the world's best phone, iPhone or Android, something crazy to make the revolution, phone revolution. Anyways, so that's how it works. So now we saw how a simple, how you can create a simple messaging extensions from the scratch used in the Copilot. Now let me just quickly switch the gears into a relatively complicated applications where it will consume the data from your homegrown API layer. What I'll do is that, let me quickly stop how the running instances of that. This is the running instance, because what happens is, since I'm running in locally, there is going to be a, since both of these applications is going to use the same port, I will have a port conflict. So I'll just stop it here. All right, just move it against this another window. What I'm going to do is, this is the applications which I'm talking about. Again, what you can see is that uh, it is relatively complicated applications compared to the very first one which you created. All it has is that it has various, let's say, first I'll go to the app manifest file. Now you can see here there are large number of parameters which is already available over here. You've got a product name search, you've got a category name search, and you've got an inventory status as well. So in your scenarios, you will be able to give a complicated query, something like, let's say, give me all the uh, beverages who is running out of stock. Let's say whose stock count is less than 50, because you cannot expect the users to go to that applications and do the query. With a Copilot, within the Copilot itself, you give the query, the Copilot will go and get the data and give back the result. For doing that, what you do is that within your messaging extension, you give all the complicated or all the possible parameters which the user will ask, so that the user will be able to get the data based on this one. All right. So in this particular scenarios, you can see that I think there are 5 parameters which is going to be there. We've got a supplier city, we've got an inventory status, we've got a category name, and a product name. So these are the amounts which is given. Another important thing which you have to make sure is that when you give a parameter, you need to ensure that you give a proper description here, so that again the Copilot will be able to understand or identify the intent what you're searching. Because for Copilot, the core idea is that it has to identify the intent on what you're searching, whether we are searching about some beverages or all these items. So you need to be more descriptive over here, give the details in proper language, so that the Copilot will be able to understand it. Similarly, like I mentioned, another important thing is that you need to give the details over here as well. Again, here what I've mentioned is that I've referred a environment file. So if I go here, this is the description which I've given here, so that the Copilot will be able to understand about this app. Okay. So what I'll do is that I'll just quickly run the code, and I'll run a couple of prompts and we'll explain the code after that if we have time. So I'm going to run this one. Now, unlike the previous application, this particular applications, like I mentioned already, here in my scenarios, all my API layer, all my database is in my local. But it's just a hello world application. But in your real-time scenarios, what happens is that you will have an applications, you will have a database in, let's say, any kind of SaaS services or your on-premises, and we'll be doing it. So in my scenarios, everything is in a single layer. Again, it is just a prototype. This will not be the case in your scenario, but it doesn't really matter. For the extension to work, all the extension needs is an API endpoint, and the moment it has an API endpoint, it will get the data as and when. All right. All right. We've got things running up here. Super. Again, I have to give my password. I have my MFA. What it does is that I'll just add this one. Now, what you see here is this is the default out of the box messaging extensions which you're going to get here. So when you create a messaging extensions, what happens is that a messaging extension, this kind of interface will be available where you'll be able to search the informations right from here. Say, for example, I'm going to search for, let's say, chai. Again, as of now, when we are showing here, we are not using the Copilot yet because all it is doing is that we are using a messaging extensions to get the informations. Now, the problem with this particular approach is that if you do want to do a combination of search, you will have to do a comma separated query, do all kind of combinations, permutations, and combinations. Now, that will be a real problem for the end users because end users may not know how it really works. So if you want to do, let's say, show me the list of suppliers who is giving a reduction of, let's say, more than 50% of their cost. Those kind of combinations, if you want to do that, this kind of user interface is going to be cumbersome. That is why you have the Copilot coming into picture. So how it works is that if I go to Copilot here, thank you. I know about this. So like I mentioned, thing which I do is that I'll click on the plugin, and you see here, what I'm going to do is that I'm going to switch off this npm finder local, and I'm going to switch on am northwind local because that is the plugin which I'm going to use in my search query. So the search query which I will use is that show me the list of, or I'll do something like this, list of beverages from northwind. All right, let's hope it works. So while it loads, you can see that in the debugger, you can even see the list of queries which is going to happen under the covers. Now, when we give that query, you can see that, okay, there is going to be 12 products which has been queried from the Northwind database, and it will process the data accordingly. Now, let's just quickly switch the window. Sorry, where is that? Ah, there you go. You see here? What you can see is that it will give the list of all the beverages which is already available. Along with that, the most important advantage is that it will also give a reference details as well. It will show you how the data has been taken from. Now, if you see here, this is pretty straightforward. I mean, it is just a normal bulleted approaches which is given up here. Here, what it does is that it has an adaptive card over here where you'll be able to make the user interface super rich. Now, we are within the Copilot. Along with that, we have extended using the adaptive cards to make it more and more richer. Now, the cherry on the cake is you can even take an action from here. You click on take action, and you can even update the stocks over here. So imagine the power it will bring. You don't even need to go to the source system. You can even take an action directly from the Copilot. One, you'll be able to get the needed information from the Copilot. You'll be able to take the information, do the action from the Copilot as well. Let me just do a quick action over here. Let's see. I'll update the stock into, let's say, what is this number of stocks here? Oh, yeah, we've got units in stock is 69. I think I've realized that I've got the stock to be, let's say, 80. Somehow it is not working. That's okay. Anyways, I think there's a glitch in this one, but that's okay. I'll show you this particular action in a different ways. Now let's make this one a bit more flashy, right? I just want to get the items of beverages whose number of stocks is, let's say, less than 50. Okay. So what I'll use that with less than 50. Okay. Now, typically what happens is that if you want to do this in your homegrown application, will have to go to that application, give the query over here. Now, with the Copilot, all you're doing is that you're just typing it in your natural language, and it'll give you the details in this one. You see this one? These are the three beverages whose stock is less than 50. Now, let's make this a bit more crazier, right? Let me do another crazy prompt here. Okay, I'm not going to type it here. I've just had the prompt kept over here. I'll just paste it and then I'll explain. So here what I'm going to do is that I want to list the beverages along with the stock count. And if the stock count is less than 20, I have to show this cross mark in your interface. And if the stock is between 20 and 50, I have to show this particular icon. And if the stock is more than, sorry, I think I missed it. 50, 50 shows this in the status column. So this is the use case which you will typically get from your users, right? Where you will have to list the list of beverages pretty easily, and you'll be able to, let's say, send it to your manager, send it to the right team and everyone. Again, this is one of the simple prompt which I've given. You can even make it crazier prompt. You can even do a combinations which will get from, let's say, multiple documents, multiple data sets and everything. So let's try giving this prompt over here. Show me the list of beverages. I have also mentioned in the prompt that I have to get back the result in a tabular format so that I'll be able to easily send it across to my manager. You see this? With a simple prompt, what I did is that I just gave a prompt into the Copilot. Copilot got back the data from this one on got back the data from the database and gave the details in the format which is like. Now the best way you can do that, you can even copy this one. You can copy it and send it across to your manager. Now let's ask the Copilot one more thing. Uh, send. Give me. Give me create an email message template using the above result which needs to be sent to Arjun, informing the details and asking for any action. So what it does is that using this prompt, it will get the details and it will take the data from the above informations and will create the email message for you. Now, how cool is that? All you need to do is that you just need to copy this informations and send it across to your manager. Now, this is some one of the simple use cases which you want to do that. You can even make your prompt super crazy. Let me give you another example over here. Okay, I'll just create a new chat from here. Just a second. Sorry. I'll create a new chat. Okay, so that I'll have my prompts clear. Fine. Let's see. Let's get this particular prompt again. So what it does is that it will invoke the messaging extension. Oh, this is interesting. I did not get that. Please. I think I did it wrong. Well, like they say, right? You cannot trust the AI 100%. You will have to have some kind of manual intervention to ensure that we get the proper details. But again, let's see. Let's hope it works. Hmm. Anyways, Let me just quickly check my backend. It is not able to get any details, but that's okay. Try to create it across. Okay, I think I have a prompt set up here. Okay, let's make it simple. Super. So I'm going to get the list of beverages from the Northwind database. What I'm going to do is that I'm just going to make a different prompt here. All right. What are the payment terms for the supplies? Ah, So here what it does is that it will get the structured data which is there in your database. It will combine or run the query against your existing documents which is there in your OneDrive or SharePoint or anywhere, and will give you back the details as well. Let's see whether we get the proper details here. Now you see here, we got the details in a super crisp manner. We got the list of beverages and we also got the payment terms associated with that. You can see that the payment terms has been highlighted on this one. And along with that, you can even view the document directly from here. So your document is already available in your M365 ecosystem. Your data is there in your, let's say, Northwind or any of your homegrown applications. And using the combination query, it will get back the response back to the user. All right, this is how you can easily manipulate the prompt, get the details which you are looking for. You can do a very complicated prompt, get back the result in a easiest way. Let me show you a one quick thing before I wind up. The same applications which we saw in the Teams, the same even you will be able to use in your Outlook as well. Say for example, if you've got a new pilot tours, Copilot, write an email informing about the stock inventory. All right, I'll just keep it. So what I'll do is there's the extensions which is already available. The same extensions, it is even available here. So what you can do is that you can give the details over here. So let's say if you want to give the details about chai, you click here, and this is how you works. So you'll be able to get the data without switching the context into your enterprise applications right from the Outlook, from your M365 chat, and the suites which you typically use in your day-to-day activities. I think we've got only 5 more minutes. I'll open up for any questions or any queries which the users may have.
Hey, first, Arjun, thank you so much. That was a great demo. In fact, kind of covered all the nitty-gritty features, and definitely the audience were pretty excited, and we have a lot many questions. So that clearly tells that how much your demo was kind of helpful to them. So without further ado, I'll just quickly have pick up few questions. So just there was one person, Santosh, I think he said, will this session cover having SSO in the app? So Arjun, I'll just leave it to you because you let me know if you wanted to come up with another session. Definitely we can cover something on the SSO related. Yeah, let us know if you have something in mind or you want to throw some light on that particular aspect.
Yes, I'll answer that. So, like I mentioned, under the covers, we use a messaging extensions over here. So, if you have a messaging extensions which you have SSO enabled, it'll even work here. So, what happens is that when the Copilot is trying to invoke that messaging extension, it will check whether it expects a token. If it expects a token, it follows the typical authentication provider where you will have to sign in if you have not signed in, and the token exchange happens. So if you already have a messaging extension where SSO is enabled, it'll automatically cascade here. Now, answering your second questions, where I will cover about, I'll be more than happy to cover about the authentication part, the SSO enablement and all, probably in future if more and more question arises. I'll be more than happy to take it as another type, because with SSO the thing is that it goes into one more level deeper. Not everyone might not be interested in that, and it may look a bit complicated as well. That's why I did not go in this session. But if interest arises, definitely I'll be more than happy.
Thanks, Arjun. Appreciate it. So, Santosh, definitely we will see if we can come up with a quick demo or a quick session on that. So, please stay tuned on our Copilot Chronicle series for that. And another question we have from Barco who says, is there a code behind this? So, Arjun, just to correct, you must be using the Northwind GitHub repo, right? Or are
That's
you
correct.
using, okay, maybe you can just share the link in the post or we will share it for you
I
and
will
you
share in
will
the post
find
right
the
away.
code there.
Yes, yes, yes,
And
yes.
yeah, we have another quick question is like, so we see there is a growing number of ways where you can kind of extend Copilot, right, for M365, whether it could be a graph connector or team messaging extension plugin or Power Platform connectors for plugin. What factors should we actually keep in our mind when we are choosing one based on what
Uh,
criteria?
Yeah, so there is no, like I mentioned in the initial presentation, there is no hard and fast rules on how do you take this one. Maybe quickly I'll show you one of the quick ways. So this is one of the quick reference which you can have a look into that, on which approach you want to use it. Say for example, if you are an organization who has already created Power Platform connectors available, and if your developers of your team is familiar with that, you can very well use the Power Platform connectors. Now, with Power Platform connectors, it is pretty straightforward, because if you are well versed in Power Platform, you can use it. But between Graph connectors and Teams messaging extensions, because both uh, inadvertently come under the same bucket. Now, which one do you want to use which? Now, imagine a scenario where you want to, let's say, index the data in your M365 ecosystem. As a typical example is, say, for example, you've got a knowledge base which is already available in your service now or for any of your existing system. And if you want your Copilot to have the reference into that as well, then Graph Connector would be the ideal scenario. One thing which you have to ensure is that in Graph Connector, the data is not real time. When I say real time, the data is already indexed into the semantic index, and the Copilot uses that. Typically, you can use an unstructured data over here where you don't have a structure. Now, when you use a messaging extension, imagine a scenario where you want to have this scenario which I explained. Let's say if you have a structured data in combination with your unstructured data. Let's say you've got a table structure where you have the inventory details, and those information is more a real-time information because it can update every second. So you need to have a real-time API consumptions in that. For that scenarios, messaging extensions would be your ideal candidate. That is one thing. Second thing, if you want your users to take an action from your Copilot, let's say if you want to update the stock or if you want to do some kind of modifications, then messaging extension is the only way, because in graph connectors, it is only one way communication. You can only read the data, you cannot write the data. If you want to have a write the data, you will have to have messaging extensions. So these are some of the broader thumb rules which you can use it. But again, it all depends on the business cases. I mean, I'm being a typical consultant here. It all depends. So that's how you can decide.
Definitely very true, Arjun. Because most of the time, when I'm kind of choosing between a lot of things, it all boils down to one point: is what is your use case and whether does it
True,
fit your requirement, and based on that, you
true,
have
true.
to take a decision. Well said.
Exactly.
Yeah. Another question is like, since you've been covering about Graph API and all that stuff, I always had this question like, how do you kind of optimize your performance when you're acquiring a large amount of data? What is that few things that we have to keep in mind when we are doing this performance or optimization factor in our mind?
Well, good question. So now, in this particular scenario, let's take an example of, let's say if you've got a messaging extensions where you are querying emails. I'm sure it is going to be a hypothetical scenario, but let's say emails of the people. So if you're using the graph under the covers, if you're using the graph API under the covers, you need to ensure that one, you're not hitting the throttling, because that's the most important thing. The moment you hit the throttling, your application is going to fail. So you need to, what you need to ensure is that you are keeping all the guardrails in place when you do that. That is one thing. Now, if you are not sure how do you do that, there is also an amazing tool which has been created by a couple of Microsoft folks called DevProxy. Again, I'll give the link of that after the session. What you can do is that when you're creating the application using the DevProxy, you can simulate the probable errors which you come from an API. Because when it comes to API, see, your end of the day, your application is using APIs. So if there is a failure in the API, your application is going to fail. One way to check is that you are going to ensure that all the possible pitfalls are being taken care of. So you can simulate the probable errors in using the dev proxy. You can ensure that your application is kind of 95 or 98% foolproof using this approach. So during the development itself, you try to simulate the errors and ensure that you have all the exception caught in your application. That is one way. Second way is about the scalability. Let's say it all depends on how many users you are using going to get concurrently. If you've got a large number of users who are going to concurrently use the system, definitely your application will have to be scalable, meaning you have to ensure that it follows the proper application architecture guidelines, be it a monolithic or be it a micro, whatever approach. So it all depends on what is the number of concurrent users. But if you are going to deal with the large data, couple of things, throttling is one thing which you have to do, and the API level. But if you're going to handle with the concurrent users, you need to ensure that your application is going to handle the concurrent application. So there is no one way answer, Kamal, to your question. If it is about the data, you have to ensure that the pitfalls are caught. If it is about the scalability, you have to ensure that your application is built in such a way that it is scalable. Because under the covers, messaging extension is just an abstraction which has been brought out. The core idea is your application is going to run on top of that.
Totally agree. That was definitely a different view of optimizing a large volume of data. And that's always a real time problem that every developer or an architect faces. And that
True.
comes to it. So just wanted to understand your perspective
Uh,
and how to handle this. Yeah.
yeah, one more add. One when you want to get the information from your external system, especially to the Copilot, don't try to bring the entire data to the Copilot. You take the subset of the information which you want to get back. A typical example again, if I go back to the knowledge base again, let's say if you've got a large number of knowledge base, it's a huge knowledge base, and you don't want all your users to use the entire knowledge base. The best way is that take a subset of that so that you will get an effective result from your Copilot, and your index limit is not breached. Because remember, this all runs on index limits. And if you're going to bring a huge data into your M365, it is going to have an issue with that. So that is one more thing which you can have a look into.
Definitely. All right. I think we are almost running out of time. So thank you, Arjun, so much. That was a great insight. In case we have any more questions, we will try to pick it up from the comment or we will try to leave it. We'll read the response. And thanks again, Arjun. Hoping to see you getting featured in our live stream more frequently with more demo cases, which was the best part of the session. And folks, this again, we will have next week with another insightful session on Copilot, Teams, AI Library, M365. So stay tuned. And Pat, thank you so much for being a great host and our organizer. Looking forward to it. We do have questions pouring in, Arjun, but it's time. We'll take it offline. And thank you so much for being on the Copilot Chronicles. See you next week.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Pleasure to be here.